Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy an uplifting story, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss any new updates. Today, I'm going to share something I've never told anyone before, a tale about a concealed truth, an unforeseen bond, and how a single moment in the kitchen altered everything. I'm Elizabeth, and I'm 22 years old. A few months ago, my mother remarried a man named Hudson, and my life was completely transformed. We moved to a new town and settled into a roomy house with unfamiliar faces. My mom and I were no longer by ourselves. I now had a new family. Hudson was incredible, warm and inviting, but despite his kindness, I often felt like an outsider, as if I didn't quite belong. Then there was my stepbrother Gabriel, who was 23. He had a quiet, harsh charm that was hard to resist. He had a deep passion for photography and would often disappear with his camera, capturing moments from his surroundings. He gave off an air of mystery, seemingly absorbed in thought, as if he saw things beyond the comprehension of others. He wasn't cold or cruel, but there was something enigmatic about him, as though he was hiding something, perhaps his feelings. I too was grappling with my own difficulties. Leaving behind my old life, friends, and even my boyfriend in the city proved more challenging than I had expected. The relationship had been unstable for months, but the combination of moving and breaking up was overwhelming. Stay tuned. This is only the start of a tale that is changing my life in unforeseen ways. I often felt isolated, retreating into my own space, either reading or watching television. But everything changed one fateful evening in the kitchen. It was late, around midnight, and the house was quiet and dark, with everyone else asleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of my old home and the life I had left behind. I decided to make myself a cup of tea, hoping it would calm my nerves. I quietly crept down the stairs, making sure not to wake anyone. The glow of the streetlights gently illuminated the kitchen, casting soft shadows throughout the room. I placed the kettle on the stove and leaned against the counter, watching the rising steam. The silence was soothing, a welcome change from my thoughts. Then I felt a presence behind me. I turned, startled, to see Gabriel standing in the doorway. His hair was messy, and his eyes were heavy with sleep. He seemed surprised to see me. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I managed a small smile. "I thought some tea might help. I'm sorry if I woke you." He shook his head and stepped into the room. "You didn't. I was already awake." He reached for a glass of water, and for a brief moment we stood side by side in silence, feeling the electric tension in the air. His warmth made my heart beat a little faster. His gaze lingered on me. "You seem different here," he remarked, almost as if he was speaking to himself. I looked at him in surprise. Moving here and leaving everything behind is a lot to take in. Honestly, I feel lost. He listened quietly, and it felt good to share my feelings with someone who wasn't familiar with the messy details of my past life. He didn't say anything, but his expression showed a kind understanding, encouraging me to continue without overthinking. I leaned against the counter and looked up at him. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what it is?" He met my gaze and nodded slowly. "Every day." We stood there, immersed in each other's gaze, the silence thick with unspoken emotions. My pulse quickened, and warmth spread across my cheeks. There was something tangible between us, something both unspoken and undeniable. Then, almost instinctively, he stepped closer, his hand resting on the counter beside mine. For a moment, I didn't understand what was happening. It felt like a scene from a movie. His fingers brushed mine, lightly, tentatively, as though testing the waters. My breath caught, and I looked up to find him staring down at me. His eyes were dark and intense, and my heart raced, every nerve in my body awakened. "Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice low and uncertain, but he didn't pull away. I felt an irresistible draw toward him, pulled into the quiet intensity between us. I leaned in, just enough to close the gap between us, and his hand found mine. Our fingers intertwining in a silent acknowledgement of the connection we both felt, but hadn't dared to speak aloud. Before I knew it, he was leaning down, his lips just inches from mine. My mind screamed at me to pull away, to stop before we crossed a line that would change everything. But my heart urged me to stay, to see where this moment might lead. For once, I listened to my heart. When our lips finally met, it was soft and tentative, both of us afraid we might break the spell. But that initial touch was electric, sending shivers down my spine. It felt so right, so natural. After that night, everything changed, seemingly destined to happen. We both knew what had transpired between us, but never spoke about it. Instead, it became our little secret, something we cherished in those quiet, stolen moments when no one else was around. I often found myself in the kitchen late at night, hoping he'd join me, and he always did, as if he could sense my anticipation. We would sit together, immersed in quiet conversation, sharing laughter and secrets. When the house grew silent and we were certain no one was watching, we'd steal kisses under the soft light of the kitchen, our hands entwined, hearts racing. Our connection deepened with every passing night. We'd sneak into each other's rooms, quietly climbing through the balcony to avoid being noticed. Our talks became more personal, and our touches lingered longer. Whispers filled with meaning exchanged between us made the experience both thrilling and terrifying. We were keenly aware of the potential consequences should anyone find out, but in those secret, quiet moments, it was just the two of us, souls unexpectedly united. He became my confidant, my closest friend, and something more, just as I became his. Our evenings were filled with laughter, stolen kisses, and whispered dreams, with each moment strengthening the bond we shared. Every instance felt like a beautiful secret we kept from the world, a fragile yet profound connection that belonged solely to us. As the weeks went by, our connection only grew stronger. We continued our quiet meetings, slipping into each other's rooms and using the balcony to remain unseen. Our conversations delved deeper, our hands intertwined longer, and our touches were gentle, yet carried a sense of urgency. In the solitude of the night, far from prying eyes, it was just the two of us. We spoke for hours until the first light of dawn threatened to break, sharing secrets that no one else could understand, enveloped in the warmth of those stolen moments. However, one afternoon, everything changed. I was lounging in the living room, idly scrolling through my phone, when the doorbell rang. I was surprised to see Caleb, my ex-boyfriend, standing there with a hopeful grin. He had come down from the city, wanting to talk things through and possibly reconcile. His sudden arrival caught me off guard, and I wasn't sure how to react. Part of me felt the familiar attachment return, but I could feel Jacob's gaze fixed on me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Caleb entered and took my hand, leading me to the couch. I noticed Jacob's jaw tightening as he watched us from the kitchen, his face clouded with emotion. The tension in the room was palpable as Caleb tried to explain why he had come, but it was Jacob's words that filled my mind, making it difficult to concentrate. Later that evening, after Caleb had left, I found Jacob waiting for me in the kitchen. His eyes were stormy, arms crossed, his gaze locked onto me. The warmth that usually filled his eyes was replaced with something more intense. Without saying a word, he grabbed his jacket and motioned for me to follow him outside. We walked, and although I didn't know where we were going, I trusted him, sensing that he needed to escape the house, away from the memories of Caleb's visit. After driving for a while, we arrived at a quiet, secluded spot by the lake. The moonlight bathed the water in a soft glow, and the air was filled with the sounds of crickets and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. He parked the car, and we sat in silence for a moment before he finally spoke, his voice low and serious. "Why didn't you tell me he was coming?" His words were steady, but I could feel the pain behind them. "I didn't know, Jake. He just showed up," I replied, reaching for his hand. "You know it's over with him." I could see the tension in his body as he looked away, his hand still tense in mine. Seeing him with you made me realize I can't keep this a secret anymore. I don't want to. I want both you and everyone else to know about us. My heart raced at his words, my chest tightening with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Are you sure?" I whispered, searching his eyes for reassurance. He nodded, pulling me closer. "I've had enough of hiding. I don't care what anyone thinks. All I know is that I need you, Elizabeth." In that moment, it felt as if the world around us disappeared, leaving just the two of us in the stillness of the night. Our lips met slowly, tenderly, each kiss a silent promise, each touch a confirmation that we were in this together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The night felt magical, a world apart from our everyday lives. With every kiss, any hesitation melted away, replaced by an undeniable sense of belonging. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the heat of his body surrounding me, our breaths mingling as we stood in the brisk night air. The lake stretched out before us, silently bearing witness to the promises we were exchanging. He held me tightly, his hands tracing down my back, drawing me closer. There was something raw and exposed in his touch, as though he feared this moment would slip away. He pressed his forehead to mine, whispering, "I want this, Elizabeth. I want us." Hearing those words made my heart swell with an unguarded affection. I kissed him deeply, pouring all the emotions I couldn't express into the kiss. We stayed entwined for hours, lost in each other's embrace, forgetting the world around us. After that night, everything changed. We knew it was time to be honest with our family. The burden of our secret had become too heavy to carry, and we both longed for a life where we didn't have to conceal our love. A few days later, we gathered our courage, preparing to tell my mother and Hudson together. As we stood in the living room, my palms sweaty and my heart racing, I glanced at Jake, who gave me a reassuring smile. We were about to reveal something deeply personal and precious, but just as I was about to speak, there was a knock at the door. It was Caleb. He had come back, this time determined not to let go so easily. My heart sank as he looked at us with a resolute, almost desperate expression. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," he said. "I can't just let you walk away like this." I exchanged a glance with Jake, who looked just as taken aback as I was. The tension in the room felt unbearable. I knew I had to make a decision, one that would determine the course of our lives. As Caleb stood there, his eyes filled with intensity that made my stomach churn, I realized the secret I had been keeping with Jake had to come out now, or we'd never be able to move forward. I glanced at Jake. His jaw was clenched, fists at his sides, holding himself back while honoring my decision. But I could see the inner struggle within him. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Caleb. "We need to talk, but not in the way you think," I said gently, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "There's something you don't know, and you deserve the truth." Caleb looked confused, glancing between me and Jake. "What's going on, Elizabeth?" he asked, impatience in his voice, suspicion creeping in. I took another deep breath, feeling Jake's presence beside me. "Caleb, things between us ended because my heart belongs to someone else." I reached for Jake's hand, and the shock on Caleb's face changed from confusion to disbelief as he pieced it together. "You're joking," he stammered, looking at Jake in shock. "With him? He's your stepbrother?" The room fell silent, Caleb's words hanging in the air. But I didn't falter. I held Jake's hand tightly, feeling a surge of strength as I faced Caleb's disbelief. "I know it sounds crazy," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, "but it's real. We've tried to ignore it, acting like it didn't matter." I looked at Jake, who nodded in agreement, his gaze unwavering. "But we truly love each other." Caleb stepped back, clearly struggling with his emotions. He looked hurt, and part of me felt the weight of our shared history, but that chapter had ended, and my heart now belonged to someone else. "You don't have to understand it," Jake said quietly, stepping forward, "but Elizabeth deserves to be with someone who truly loves her and makes her happy." After a long, tense silence, Caleb finally nodded. "If that's what you want, Elizabeth, then I won't stand in your way." He cast one last painful glance at me before turning and walking away, leaving me breathless and overwhelmed. In the days that followed, Jake and I felt a newfound freedom. The burden of secrecy had lifted, and although we knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, we were ready to face it together. There were long, emotional conversations, moments filled with shock and worry shared with my mom and Hudson. But eventually, they came to understand the deep bond Jake and I shared, accepting that it was something we couldn't deny. Our connection grew stronger with every passing day. Jake became my pillar, my confidant, the one who truly saw and understood me. We filled our days with shared moments, laughing together in the kitchen while we cooked, having heartfelt late-night talks, and enjoying the calm of quiet mornings. Every look, every touch, and every kiss reaffirmed what I already knew deep in my heart. This was where I belonged. Life would bring its challenges, and we knew the world might not always understand us. But I was confident that as long as Jake was by my side, we could face anything. We were no longer just step-siblings. We were partners, bound by a love that defied all odds, a love I believed was meant to last. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. It means so much that you've joined me on this journey. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories. I can't wait to share more with you.